Hi, everybody. I'm here with Andreea and Matthias, and we are talking about recruiter enablement. We're talking about specifically about skills-based hiring, and we'll talk about the subject in general, and then we'll go into like, how can we make this accessible? How can we enable recruiters with things in this area? And I don't know anybody much that's really done a lot in this area, but it's a hot topic. A lot of people are talking about it, and it's very obvious that it's important. So let's ask you both for a quick introduction. Andreea, let's start with you.
Quick intro. Thanks for having me back. I'm Andreea. I'm a principal in talent acquisition, 14 years plus in the space. I'm also the founder of the Talent Crunch Berlin, with Matthias being my close partner in crime there. And most of my profession has been spent in tech talent acquisition with the background in consulting. That's professionally, right? And I like to talk about me as a human being because I'm really passionate about cars, not football, sorry. And I paint, and I love to paint. And I'm just your typical, not neurotypical person that you can find out there.
And I've got to say, did you transport all of you moved from Barcelona to
No, from the UK. I was Bucharest, UK, and then Berlin for the last 9 years.
Ah,
Yes, but
did you? Right, okay. But you've got the most wonderful paintings and they're very colorful, but you're in the office today, so we don't have those.
I am. Yes, I didn't transport them. The big canvases that you've seen, I made in Berlin. So the small things I brought over, but the big ones are made in Berlin.
I need to do, I'm gonna get you and William Tincup on one of these together at the same time. William Tincup has loads of paintings in the background. They're all very
Nice,
colorful, like yours, and he did them all
nice.
himself as well.
Can we do a
Matthias,
sales pitch too?
could do, absolutely. Matthias, intro to you.
Yes, I am Senior Director of Global Talent at Emnify for now over 2 years. Formerly been talent acquisition leader and also a tech recruiter. I have 13 years of experience, over 10 years in Berlin now. Yeah, been to different size of organizations. Yeah, so much startup, scale up, but also big public companies. You've seen it all. Yeah, currently also been on some podcasts and some talks, but also, as Andreea already mentioned, we have built this wonderful community in Berlin together to really enhance and facilitate the knowledge and, yeah, value or live up the talent acquisition profession a bit further. We also changed this to talent crunch now, not a TA crunch, right? So this is also a fantastic next step for us in the development of how we see we're going to tackle this in the future. And personally, I'm so much into football, so enjoying the European Championship, but also a father of a 7-year-old daughter who has her birthday today. So yeah, really enjoying that.
Well, yes. So we've got in common, we're both into football. We had probably different emotions on Friday when Germany thrashed Scotland 5-1. And I also have a 7-year-old daughter. Anyway, right, let's talk about skills-based hiring. Like, Andreea, let's start with you. Tell us about the subject, like, why is it important?
I'll start by sharing a little bit about what I've been up to in the last 4 months since I joined Thermondo. We are a clean tech company, but I would argue it's more clean than tech at the moment. So one of the first things I started tackling when I joined, I looked at the career frameworks. Luckily, we have some, right, which is still good enough because other companies don't have any. So the things that we've worked on tirelessly, and when I say we, I mean myself and my stakeholders, are primarily from technology. So we took these frameworks and we looked at how can we bring this into the recruitment processes or hiring processes, but beyond that, how can we bring this next level into looking into the quality of hire, into retention, into the topics that come after the moment of hiring. So what we started with was very, I would argue, quite basic. But starting from those career frameworks that the company had in place, we looked at building archetypes for software engineering, product management, and the technology functions that we have. And these archetypes were built by literally taking every single line of requirement in a career framework per level and explaining it in layman's terms. What does this actually mean for a software engineer? What does this actually mean for a product manager? We ended up with this humongous document originally. Then we didn't stop there. We went from there to building, okay, how do we break these down into skills? So every single additional line we broke out into the skills that would be required to successfully fulfill that requirement. And then that was my responsibility is, okay, how are we going to measure this? How are we going to measure this for the people who are here? How are we going to measure this for the people who are coming from the outside and we want to interview? So we had two things: measurement of behavior of existing employees. This I'm doing with HRBPs. And the second one is building the interview frameworks per level to include those skills and translate the skills into questions and then into, okay, these are the questions, so what? So we developed, and the last, I think, part, that's where we kind of are now, is how do we understand whether or not an individual answers the question good, so la la, or really poorly, and how do we map that against the skills we have? That's what we've been doing in the last 3 months. I joined 4 months ago, trying to build this up for the entire technical domain of Thermondo. It's been working really well, I have to say. The stakeholders, even though we are not finalized, the stakeholders have been tremendously happy to see that it's so easy now to understand, oh, okay. And before I just finish, the one thing, I think we'll come back to this in a second after Matthias maybe shares a bit more on this. I have to say, it's been a real struggle getting them outside of the mindset of hiring for, but I know them. I've worked with them before. No, but somebody recommended them to me. These biases, unconscious or conscious, they're still eating me alive, to be perfectly honest. So I think that would be the next step in the journey after we manage to finalize this part. But I hope that this breakdown gives you a bit of an understanding of what we've been doing in that regard.
Yeah, it does. That's very interesting, and it's very useful to hear about the thinking around the subject and like some of the challenges involved in it. So, Matthias, tell us about what you've done in this area. I think you've been doing things in this area for a few years now.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, second everything that Andreea said. I think that's very much the right approach, because what we are trying to do here is understanding what good looks like, right? What is expected of a person, and then what really predicts future job performance. And for me, Andreea also touched a very important topic, which is for recruiters and which is focused now on skill-based hiring. It's biases, yeah. And we know that the most biased document is the resume, yeah, because people, based on how they design the resume, what color it looks like, what pictures you have in there, what first or last name you have there, there's plenty of biases that come next to this document and the way you make decisions on who to interview. And ideally, if you have established skill-based hiring completely for all the roles that you hire for, you can you remove the resume and just do test-based assessments, right? That means, for example, depending on how your career framework looks like. So what we have done is core skills, which are like, problem solving, adaptability, accountability, relationship building, or effective communication. These are just a few. You can also take others. You could either say, I'm going to test them first, or you go into functional skills, which are, Andreea mentioned in tech and engineering, more of things that has probably to do with coding languages, or, how do you solve problems in an engineer background, or system architecture, whatever you want to take. And we had another dimension is leadership skills, right? So that means also, what do we find as a leader, right? What kind of areas do we look into? And so whatever you're going to pick and choose on those tests, I have done this with a trial version with functional skills. So I was hiring a senior talent partner in my team, and I looked at talent acquisition and tech rec ops, yeah. And then had to test 20 minutes, send them out. I not only increase the candidate experience on the top funnel, because most of the time in candidate experience on the top funnel is suffering. You have a minus 15 or 20%, 20 MPS score. So it's rather poor. And with this tests, they do a 20 minutes test instead of their resume. Then they have a better user experience. Then they get the feedback on if they made it to the cutoff score or not. And then we also share some learnings later if they haven't managed it. So even without an interaction of a human being, you already create a top funnel experience that is quite unique. And also people feel they were less biased, or we were less biased in our decision-making process. I even ended up with my trial version that people even apply just they want to take this test, right? Which is quite insane if you think about recruitment. But this is one way to tackle it. Of course, the challenges that a lot of people have, do we have all the tests we need for all the roles we have, right? Do we have a tooling that actually provides that? That's very, very tricky. On the other hand, I think if we then, what I always recommend is predicting job performance. We had someone that scored 96% out of 100, meaning even without interviewing, that person in the end got hired. So we actually predicted with this test already that it was robust enough that actually it turned out to be the right person. So if we would have not interviewed someone or just said, look, skip all the humans because they're biased anyway, we would have at least, managed to hire someone just with a test, which I do not recommend, by the way, right? I'm just saying, to stress the point that people get where I'm coming from. And what I then would add on top of this is not just tests. Tests always are supportive in your decision making, but also you need to have those interview guidelines, right? You need to have functional assessments. What I mean by that is like case studies, presentations, etc. But what is very, very important that your performance criteria, which Andreea mentioned in your career framework, are also hiring criteria, right? And that in this way, when they submit their scorecards and fill out their feedback, they have a consistent pattern and what do I focus on in each stage of the interview process.
Okay. Wow. There's quite a lot involved in this, right? So I don't know very many people that have. I know a lot of people have been talking about it. I don't know very many people that have been doing things in it. So it's really great to learn a lot about the sort of how to actually do it. Let's talk about from the recruiter enablement perspective. I think what we're talking about here is like, right, okay, all the assets, information, things that recruiters and hiring managers and candidates need, like putting it right in their hands at the point that they need whatever template or whatever it might be. How does this link to skills-based hiring? How do we make sure that everybody's got whatever they need when they need it?
I mean, Matthias touched upon this already, right? I can tell you what we do now. I love the fact that, honestly, I love the fact that I had the chance to get my hands on this and to be able to show a real life example. I talked briefly about breaking this down from the career framework to actually what's needed for a specific role. The one role we actually finalized and we got to this point that you're talking about is for us in engineering. And what we've ended up doing is, I want to touch on three things before I tell you what we ended up doing is when we look at skills-based hiring, Matthias touched upon this performance criteria, very important. We looked at it like this. One is performance criteria. Who is here? How are we going to assess them when the performance review come up? Two, who do we want to bring in and how are we going to assess them before they come in so that we make sure that they are aligned? That was the second. And three, I think this kind of tied the knot was we aim for building a quality of hire metric, and that's kind of like how we started looking at it. Now, going back to what we did, remember when I told you that we broke everything down in terms of what is expected and then how do these things look like as skills? What we then did was for interviews for a specific software engineering position that we have still open, actually, we broke it down. What are the actual expectations for this particular role? Looking at what we built already, extracted the skills, and then we broke down which of the interviews in our hiring process will look at those skills so that we don't all look at the same thing. And we are also able to incorporate as much as possible and relevant, right? It's not about bringing everything together if it doesn't necessarily make so much sense. So where do we split these skills in our interview process, and who takes care of what? And then from there, I mentioned that in this massive document we built, we actually had the questions, and we actually had how do we assess. So what ended up happening, we now have 5 templates, 1 template per interview, starting from the talent acquisition interview, hiring manager, coding challenge, you name it, broken down skills, what does good look like, and how do we know if they managed to actually answer our questions, with a grading system from 1 to 3. And this we built together with the stakeholders. This could have not been just me. It was talent acquisition and business together. And the next step with the performance piece, that's when the HR business partners or talent development would come in to tie it in and take it to the next level. These scorecards, as you call them, or we call feedback evaluation forms, they exist and they are being tied to every single interview. When we invite people for interviews, that specific scorecard is attached. And that's what the interviewers are using at the moment.
Great, very interesting, because there's so many different things that we need to do our job in recruitment. And I think it's important that they are like just in their flow of work, or they're easy to access. And you talked about the questions, you've talked about the way you assess, you've talked about the scorecarding. I mean, recruitment's not easy, right?
Nope. But if you like it, it is. If you like it, if you do it with, with curiosity and hunger and passion, it kind of can be.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with that. If you are enthusiastic about the subject, then you want to learn more about it, and it just makes it easier to adopt all the different things. Matthias, any particular tips that you have around that, like make it anybody that's listening to this who's maybe not yet launched it? Which is pretty much everybody. What are the 2 or 3 things that you would suggest, like practical things? Do these things, and this will help.
Yeah, I would recommend to, before you change the whole company about the way they hire or do performance reviews, let's start with trials, yeah? And trials in the sense of pick one role that you think you want to try this out. You then change your ATS system and everything accordingly so that you have a skill-based approach. You play around with the communication around it. You play around with the messaging. You gather feedback from candidates. And in my first trial, I say this out loud as well, I did pretty poorly on my cutoff score. So I should have done actually a much better cutoff score in the beginning than I was aiming for. I was just so mindful of people, so I decided 75 out of 100 instead of 85 out of 100, and that would have saved me a lot of applications and a lot of not so great candidate experience, because I couldn't handle so much applications at that time. But yeah, what I'm trying to say here is really look at to trial one role. Try it out, learn from it, and then do it all over again, and show also people the difference of what kind of difference it made. Share your learnings also in the organization is very important. And then really start with the basic stuff. By basic stuff, I mean, look at your scorecards, change them. Look at the job ads, right? So many times this is so obvious topic. And then look at how you communicate as well to candidates, right? We have now put all the structure in place, also what Andreea said, but how is this now communicated to candidates? How do you actually make them learn and prepare for interviews, right? I'm a huge fan of giving them even the skills for each stage, plus the expectation of that seniority level of this role in advance. Why would I bother? I have nothing to hide, right? They can prepare, and then if they do their ChatGPT style, get their own questions for those skills and the seniority levels, and could predict this even, they have done some proper preparation, right? And then we can have a solid conversation. So I do think that is something that I would consider as a low-hanging fruit. Try this out and make this more tangible and learn from it.
Wonderful. I know absolutely nothing about this subject, so it's been really great to learn from you both. Andreea Lungulescu, Matthias Schmeisser, thank you very much. It's been great to see you both again, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
See you soon.